Am I wrong for thinking my boyfriend's reaction was completely insane? Okay, I need a reality check. I really, really do. Because my entire world just imploded over the weekend, and I genuinely can't tell if I'm the villain or just the victim of the most disproportionate, insane overreaction in human history. So here it is. I messed up. I sent some flirty texts to my fitness coach, Dax. Stupid, I know. But we're talking about a handful of messages that were basically digital noise. It was a dumb, meaningless ego boost, the kind of harmless game you play when you're bored and someone gives you a little extra attention. It meant nothing. It was a joke, and it was never, ever going to go anywhere. But Titus, he didn't just get mad. He didn't yell or throw things, which honestly I could have handled. He just shut down. He saw one message pop up on my phone, and it was like a switch flipped. His face went blank. He packed a single bag, looked at me with these dead, empty eyes as if I was a complete stranger, and said, "We're done." No discussion, no "let's talk about this." Just gone. He threw away 5 years of our lives. 5 years of building a home, of future plans, of being a team. He incinerated all of it over a few stupid, meaningless messages. Am I crazy for thinking that's not just an overreaction, but genuinely cruel? He's punishing me like I burned down his house. Someone please tell me this isn't fair. For 5 years, Titus was my rock. That's the only way to describe him. He's a geologist, which is almost comically fitting, stable, predictable, solid to the core. He's the kind of man who remembers the anniversary of the day we adopted our cat, who knows the specific brand of expensive coffee I only drink when I'm stressed, and stocks up on it without me asking. He's the one who meticulously plans our vacations with spreadsheets that have columns for potential risks and snack availability. Our life was comfortable. It was a well-tended garden, neat and predictable and safe. And I loved him for it, I truly did. But if I'm being brutally honest with myself, that relentless stability sometimes felt less like a foundation and more like a cage. There were no surprises, no sudden bursts of reckless passion. Our friends had fiery arguments and dramatic makeups. We had calm, scheduled, check-in conversations. Our life was a beautiful, handcrafted ship sailing on a placid lake. But God, sometimes I just wanted a storm. And I knew his one, absolute deal-breaker. It wasn't a preference. It was a scar carved into his soul. He didn't just dislike cheating, he was pathologically terrified of it. It wasn't some abstract moral principle for him. It was a core trauma he'd carried since he was 15. His dad had an affair with a coworker, one of those drawn-out, messy situations that started with harmless lunches and ended with a family being ripped apart. Titus told me the story once, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He wasn't obsessed with the physical act, he explained. It was the 1,000 tiny lies that preceded it. The working late, the business dinners, the slow, methodical gaslighting that made his mom think she was going crazy. He talked about coming home from school to find her sobbing on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the shattered glass of a family portrait. He watched his father's casual deceptions destroy the woman he worshipped. That image was burned into his brain. We were maybe 6 months into our relationship when he laid it all out for me, his eyes vulnerable and serious. He made it crystal clear. Loyalty wasn't just important to him, it was everything. It was the air our relationship breathed. I remember taking his face in my hands, looking him directly in the eye, and promising him that he would never, ever have to feel that way with me. I promised him safety, and I meant it. But looking back, I think I saw his trauma as a historical artifact, something to be handled with care, but not something that really applied to me. I wasn't his father. My little game wasn't a business dinner. It was different. It was contained. It was my secret, and I was smart enough to keep it that way. It started, as these things always do, with a whisper of boredom. I joined a high-end gym a few months ago, a place that smelled of eucalyptus and ambition. It was my escape from the quiet, predictable rhythm of life with Titus. That's where I met Dax. He's a personal trainer, and he's the polar opposite of Titus in every conceivable way. Where Titus is quiet, thoughtful, and finds genuine excitement in a new geological survey map, Dax is loud, charming, and radiates a kind of cocky energy that's both irritating and magnetic. He has tattoos snaking up his arms and a smile that feels like a dare. The first few weeks were just gym talk. Great form on those squats, Haven. "You're killing it today." It was harmless, the kind of validation you pay for, really. But then it started to shift. He'd find reasons to touch my arm, to place a hand on my lower back to correct my form, his fingers lingering just a second too long. I knew exactly what he was doing, and I didn't stop him. I liked it. It was a flicker of excitement in my beige-colored life. That jolt of forbidden attention felt like a drug, a secret I could carry around that made the world seem brighter. Then he found me on Instagram, and the messages started. It was a slow, calculated escalation. At first, they were just replies to my stories, fire emojis on a selfie, a looking good on a workout post. I told myself it was just friendly networking, but I knew it wasn't. The DMs became more frequent, more personal. He'd ask about my job, not in the polite, detached way Titus did, but with a conspiratorial edge, as if we were a team against the world. "Tell me you told your idiot boss off," he'd write. I found myself telling him about a frustrating meeting, details I hadn't even bothered to share with Titus. A little alarm bell would go off in my head, the one that sounded like Titus's quiet voice telling me about his mother on the kitchen floor. But then Dax would send another message, a perfectly timed selfie of him looking roguish, and the thrill would just shout that little voice down. Last week, he'd stayed late to give me some extra pointers on my deadlift. The gym was almost empty, the music low. The air felt thick. Nothing happened, of course. I would never let anything happen, but the potential for something to happen hung between us. That's what we were both feeding on, and I played along. God, I was so arrogant. I saw it as a game of chess. I was the queen, in complete control. I would reply with something witty but non-committal, something that kept him on the hook but gave me plausible deniability. "You'd probably get bored of me in a week," I'd text back, feeling a thrill as I hit send. I was walking a tightrope, and the danger was the whole point. I convinced myself I was just using him for an ego boost, a little dopamine hit to get me through the week. I had it all perfectly compartmentalized. The real world with Titus and the fantasy world in my phone. I was the master of this stupid, secret game. I wasn't going to let it get messy. I was just having a little harmless fun. The moment it all came crashing down was so mundane, so domestic, it felt surreal. It was last Saturday night. We were on the couch, wrapped in our favorite worn blanket, halfway through a nature documentary about deep-sea volcanoes that Titus was completely engrossed in. He was explaining something about hydrothermal vents, his hand resting on my knee, the weight of it familiar and comforting. The cat was asleep on his lap. It was a perfect picture of our quiet, stable life. I was barely listening, my mind buzzing from the days back and forth with Dax. It was our best performance yet, a masterclass in implication and innuendo without ever saying anything explicit. I felt clever, a little giddy with the secret power of it all. I had left my phone on the coffee table, face up. I never do that. It's usually glued to my hand or face down, a habit so ingrained I don't even think about it. But I was comfortable, lulled into a false sense of security by the familiar scene. The soft lamplight, the drone of the narrator, Titus's steady presence beside me. It was a fatal moment of carelessness, born from the arrogance of thinking I had everything under control. Then, the screen lit up. The vibration against the wood of the table was unnervingly loud in the quiet room. Both our heads snapped towards it, and there it was, displayed in stark white letters against the black lock screen, a banner notification from Instagram. Dax, still thinking about our private session yesterday. You owe me a real drink for that. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the words and my blood ran cold. The winking emoji felt like a tiny digital bomb detonating in the middle of my living room. My mind raced, a frantic, panicked scramble to assemble a plausible lie. He's just joking, it's a running gag at the gym. He calls all his one-on-one training sessions private sessions. The excuses were flimsy, pathetic, and I knew it. They sounded like the exact kind of transparent lies his father must have told his mother. Titus didn't move. He just stared at the phone. I watched his profile, the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He didn't look at me. He just slowly, deliberately removed his hand from my knee. The warmth was gone. He gently lifted the sleeping cat off his lap and placed him on the cushion beside him. The silence that followed was terrifying. It was heavier than any argument, filled with the weight of 5 years of trust turning to dust. The documentary droned on about tectonic plates shifting, and I felt the ground beneath me crack open. I opened my mouth to start spinning my web of lies, to perform the magic trick of explaining it all away. But for the first time, I realized my magic was gone. The game was over. I braced myself for the explosion, for the yelling, the accusations, the tears. I had a script ready for that fight, a whole flowchart of defenses and counterattacks. But the explosion never came. Titus just sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone as if he was trying to decipher an ancient text. Then he turned to me, and his face was a perfectly calm, unreadable mask. That was so much worse than rage. "Haven," he said, his voice completely level, devoid of any emotion. "You know what this is." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. My prepared lines died in my throat. "Titus, it's not what you think," I stammered, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. "It's a stupid joke. Dax is just like that. We were just messing around." He didn't even blink. "Messing around," he repeated, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were the part that broke me. They weren't angry. They were just tired. A deep, soul-crushing weariness, like a soldier who had just survived a war only to find the enemy waiting in his own home. "You knew," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "Of all people, you knew what the one rule was. It wasn't even about sex. It was about this. The secrets, the little games. The lies." "I didn't lie," I cried, my voice shrill with panic. "Nothing happened." "It doesn't matter what happened," he said, standing up. "It matters that you were willing to let it happen. It matters that you chose to play this game, knowing it was the one thing that could destroy me. That could destroy us." He walked into our bedroom. I followed him, my pathetic excuses turning into desperate pleas, then into angry accusations. "You're being ridiculous. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Are you really going to throw 5 years away over a text message?" I shouted at his back as he pulled a duffel bag from the closet. He didn't answer. He just moved with a calm, methodical purpose, packing a few shirts, his toothbrush, his laptop. He moved like a stranger in our home. When he was done, he walked to the door. I stood in his way, sobbing now. "Please, Titus, don't do this." He looked at me one last time, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of the man I loved, a flash of immense pain. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a cold, hard finality. "I can't," he said. "I can't live waiting for the next text message to pop up. I already watched that movie. I know how it ends." And then he was gone, closing the door softly behind him. The first few days were a blur of denial and fury. I stalked around our empty apartment, which suddenly felt huge and hostile, replaying his final words in my head. How dare he? I'd raged to myself. He was being self-righteous, sanctimonious. He was using his childhood trauma as a weapon to punish me for a minor, insignificant mistake. I bombarded his phone with texts, swinging wildly from apologetic. "I'm so sorry, I was an idiot, please come home," to indignant, "You're being a child. This is insane. You owe me a conversation." They were all met with the same suffocating silence. He had blocked my number. On the third day, desperate for an ally, I called our mutual friend Isla. I launched into my carefully curated version of the story, painting myself as the bewildered victim of Titus's rigid, unforgiving nature. I emphasized the nothing happened part, described the text as a silly joke, and framed his departure as a shocking and disproportionate act of cruelty. I expected her to gasp, to agree that he was being crazy, to offer to talk some sense into him. Instead, there was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. "Isla," I said, my bravado faltering, "are you there?" "I'm here," she finally said, and her voice was laced with a weariness that mirrored the look I'd seen in Titus's eyes. "Haven, what did you think was going to happen?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean? I didn't think he'd end our entire relationship." "Didn't you?" she asked, her tone gentle but firm. "You, of all people, knew his history. You knew his one hard line. This isn't about a flirty text, and you know it. You were playing with fire right next to a giant, clearly marked canister of gasoline. And now you're shocked that the whole thing blew up," she sighed. "You didn't just flirt with some guy, Haven. You took Titus's deepest, most painful wound, the one he trusted you with, and you poked it with a stick just to see what would happen." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. They were the truth, a truth I had been desperately trying to outrun. The call ended with a polite but cool distance. Later that week, driven by some masochistic impulse, I started cleaning out the closet to make it feel less empty. Tucked away on the top shelf, behind a stack of old sweaters, I found a small, elegant box from a local jeweler. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a receipt. It was a deposit for a custom-designed engagement ring. The design notes on the paper described a simple, beautiful band with a single, ethically sourced sapphire, my birthstone. The planned pickup date was noted at the bottom, our 5-year anniversary, which was 2 weeks away. A few weeks have passed. The raw, screaming anger has mostly faded, leaving behind something hollow and achy. I'm sitting with Isla at some loud, trendy cocktail bar she insisted would be good for me. I'm wearing a dress I know Titus would have hated, too short, too tight. My makeup is perfect, a carefully constructed mask of indifference. Honestly, it's a relief, I say, swirling the olive in my martini and forcing a bright, brittle smile. I'm starting to realize how controlling he was, with all his rules and his baggage. I feel free, you know? I take a loud sip of my drink, performing for an audience of one. I'm already back on the apps. The options are, let's just say, an upgrade. Isla just watches me, her expression unreadable. She doesn't challenge the lie. She knows what I'm doing. I pull out my phone, my movements theatrical. Look, I'll show you. This guy, a doctor, my voice trails off. My thumb, moving on pure muscle memory, has already swiped past the dating apps. It navigates to my contacts list, a path it has taken thousands of times, and stops on his name, Titus. The little icon next to it is still a gray, featureless silhouette. Below his name, in small, damning letters, it still says, Contact Blocked. My thumb hovers over the useless call button. The noisy bar fades into a dull roar. The bright smile on my face freezes, then cracks. For a split second, the mask slips, and the vast, crushing weight of what I've lost presses down on me, stealing the air from my lungs.